Hi VC, James here. Just a quick video for you today. This is going to be a response video to Shannon D, who made a video a while back, and the title of it was Growing Into Music. It was a very interesting video. I'll put the link down below. It was a video that Shannon made about the fact that she had started getting into listening to Frank Sinatra, who is an artist that she hadn't been into in her younger days. In fact, she'd been quite dismissive of Frank back in the day, and but she discovered as she got older and as she sort of developed a new sensibility, a new musical taste or whatever, she decided, or that she found, that she was liking him more and more, liking his music. And she invited people to contribute to the thread, and it kind of got me thinking a little bit about musical taste and how it changes over the years for some people. Some people's tastes don't change, I find. I mean, my dad is in his mid-70s and he listens to the exact same music as he listened to when he was in his 20s. Hasn't changed at all. I used to have a mate who stopped listening to music in 1976 when punk happened. He didn't like punk, he didn't like any of the punk bands. He was a prog fan. Never listened to anything after 1976. He said it was all complete rubbish. So missed out on a fair few things. But if you talk to him, it's quite interesting, because it's kind of, he likes everything from the Beatles through to about 1976, and then his interest in music kind of stopped. And that's completely fair enough. I mean, who are we to judge? People are allowed to stop changing. That's absolutely fine. In fact, I think often there's an attitude, some people have a slightly holier than thou attitude when it comes to being into new music. There's a pressure, I think, sometimes in consumer society to be always on the lookout for the next new thing, to be looking for new music all the time. Here in the UK, John Peel, the DJ, he really promoted this idea of being interested in the new all the time. And he always said that his main interest was not in listening to music that he knew already, but he was constantly chasing down new thrills, and he very famously completely alienated his fan base, his listeners in 1976 when he played the Ramones for the first time on his show, and he also started to play reggae as well. And John Peel had always been the big champion of progressive rock and so on, and he lost millions of listeners almost overnight, but kind of gained a whole new audience. And after that, in this country, a kind of culture has arisen, on the radio and so on, of new music. If you listen to Radio 1, you will often hear this little jingle, new music, the home of new music. And it's kind of like we're all sort of encouraged all the time to seek out the new, seek out the novel. And I've been guilty of that in the past. I went through a phase of, it's almost like you're trying to deliberately change your taste. It's not enough to be enjoying the records you already have, or to be digging the artists that you've always loved. The important thing is to be trying to find the next thing, and what's the next thing. I went through a phase of buying rough trade compilations, CD compilations, and I had loads of these things, and I would listen to them. I'd put them on the iPod, and I would enjoy some of the stuff, but if I'm completely honest with myself, and I look back now, I can't think of a single track of any of those compilations. In fact, I think I've got rid of most of them. But I do go through phases, slightly manic phases, where I think to myself, I must stop listening to the same old stuff. I need to change, I need to develop. But these things can't be forced, I don't think. You can't kind of force yourself to suddenly start liking a different kind of music. I think you stay broadly speaking within your taste, and you kind of gravitate towards things that you like. I grew up in the 1970s when British pop music was very immediate. It had a very immediate appeal. All those bands, not just British bands, but American bands, Blondie and Madness and so many, the Police and the Pretenders. There was a period where British and American pop music in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, it was all very immediate. The songs were all full of hooks. That was the thing, it was hooky all the time. And that was the music that I kind of absorbed, from an early age. I absorbed hooky pop music, and I could have continued forever in that vein. I loved Squeeze and I loved Paul McCartney. Anybody who could write a damn good 3-minute pop tune, that was my kind of thing, you know. And so to this day, I will naturally gravitate towards that. If I hear a really good hook in a song, it will grab me. But there was a period when I started to change, and it was kind of in my 20s. I started listening to different kinds of music. This is an artist that springs to mind, Dr. John. This is when I was getting interested in American music, I suppose. I'd started listening to blues and soul, and then I can't remember how I got onto Dr. John. It was probably through Jules Holland. But I bought a CD compilation and listened to it, and it really wasn't my kind of thing, you know. It wasn't hooky in the same way that British pop music had been or American pop music had been. It was more to do with the vibe or the groove and the musicianship and the atmosphere. And this comes from a very particular tradition, you know, from New Orleans. He's got very deep roots, and to appreciate Dr. John, you have to kind of go back and explore those roots a little bit and try and understand where he's coming from. So this is an example of an album which it wasn't immediately to my tastes, and I had to kind of persevere with it. I think this concept of persevering with music, it can make people a bit suspicious sometimes. People say, well, surely if you have to persevere with something, what's the point? You know, either you like it or you don't like it. And it's true to an extent, but you know, there are artists that I have worked on, so to speak. You know, Bob Dylan is a classic example. For years and years I tried with Dylan. And I used to ask myself, why am I bothering? If I don't like this guy's voice and I don't like what he's doing, why am I forcing myself to try and like it, you know? And I am a little bit of a sucker for that, you know. If I think that a band or an artist has a reputation, it's very difficult for me to just forget that artist. I mean, people do it all the time, you know. People don't bother listening to the Beatles, they don't bother listening to Dylan, they don't bother listening to this band, because they're not interested. But to me, if a band or an artist has got that level of reputation or that level of influence, you know, and so many people have loved that music over the years, I will seek that music out and try my best to get into it, because I kind of feel like, well, surely it must be me that's wrong. You know, if I don't like that immediately, but just look at how many people have. There must be something to it, you know, and that works with me for Dylan. Genuinely did. I persevered with him, I listened to him, I traced back and I listened to people that he had liked. I read books about him, and people are a bit suspicious of that as well, the idea that you can read a book about somebody and then get into their music. You know, it sounds a bit pretentious, almost like you're kidding yourself, you know, but I think it's true. You can, I don't want to use the word educate yourself because it sounds a bit pretentious, but you can cultivate your tastes, I believe, if you want to. Some people don't want to, that's absolutely fine, you know. So, I mean, some artists have always grabbed me. I first heard The Doors when I was about 21, and I was learning to play the drums, and I heard this album and it kind of grabbed me by the scruff of my neck. It was like that, you know. But when I look back, I realised The Doors had been kind of seeping into my consciousness for a while. I first heard them when I went away to university when I was kind of 18, and their music had drifted into my sphere of orbit, you know. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it appears like all of a sudden you've got into somebody, but it's been brewing for a while. You've gradually been absorbing, you've been hearing, you've been keeping your ears open, you know. Even, you know, you're not conscious of it sometimes. You're not conscious that you are, but you are. You're exposed to new influences, and these things gradually take hold. And then all of a sudden you have that eureka moment when you kind of go, yeah, I've got this and I love it. That happened with me with Bob Dylan. It took ever such a long time, but I clicked with Blonde on Blonde. I had it in my car on a cassette, and I was driving around here, there and everywhere for work, and you know, this, that and the other, and all of a sudden I really started to dig the musicianship and the grooves and the voice and the songwriting. It all just came together in this kind of magical explosion, you know. Anyway, so just want to conclude this video by talking about a thorny subject that some people might not be very sympathetic to, and that's the idea of, and I've heard Jeff Party talking about this as well, this idea that you grow into certain kinds of music as you get older. And the reason for that is that the music just is the kind of music that appeals more to older people than it does to younger people. You know, this is where the Frank Sinatra thing comes back in with Shannon. Certain kinds of music appeal to young people, you know, rock and roll, pop music. I remember when I was a kid, or you know, when I was a teenager, I was really into Kiss. And I remember I had a copy of Dressed to Kill, I think it was Boxing Day, and I was at my grandmother's house, and she said something like, oh, you know, because my parents were not that keen on me, you know, listening to that kind of music. And my grandmother said, oh, don't worry, you know, he'll grow out of it. And I took umbrage at that. I was kind of annoyed at this kind of patronising idea that there's, you know, there are certain kinds of music that you grow out of. And I said to her, I will never grow out of Kiss. I will always be into Kiss. And it's true to an extent, I still am, you know. I always wonder about, I've had friends through the years who've left music behind, they've been really into something in their youth, and then they just sort of cut it dead and never listen to that music again, never like that music again, claim to have no interest in it, you know. That's never been my way. If I'm into something, if I'm really into something at any stage of my life, then if you catch me further down the line, I will still be able to hear something in that music. I won't put it on and go, I can't hear anything in this now. It just means nothing to me. If something connects with me, then I stay connected to it. I stay plugged into it. I might not listen to it that much anymore, and there might be music that I now prefer, but I won't let go of that music. It's still there. It's still part of who I am, you know. But there are some artists, I think, who make more sense to me, I'm not speaking for everybody, who make more sense as you get older. This is a classic example, Van Morrison. I never used to like Van Morrison. I could never see the point in him. His music didn't seem to have any hooks. It never seemed to be that memorable. It never seemed to have any, I don't know, I just didn't like it. I remember I heard Astral Weeks for the first time when I was probably about 30. I got it from the library on a CD, listened to it, just didn't get it. I never even used to like his voice, you know. And then I was asked to play drums for a guy, just on the spur of the moment. He was doing a gig and he wanted me to play Moondance, the song, so I learnt it and I listened to it and I thought, actually, I quite like this song. And we played it together in this pub, and then a few months later I was doing a gig somewhere else, and after the gig had finished, we were just kind of, you know, playing this pub, and Van Morrison, the person behind the bar put a Van Morrison CD on, you know, just as they were clearing up, and I heard the song, you know, The Mystic, and all of a sudden it just kind of swept over me, this kind of feeling of like what have I been missing here, you know. Van Morrison, I mean, he has written hook-based songs. I mean, this album has Jackie Wilson Said, which is a great little hooky song. But he's also done this stuff that I would characterise as oceanic. I think it's the jazz thing, you know, it's deep music. It's not music for sort of cavorting around to and shaking your head and going woo. It's not even necessarily music which is going to stick in your head or get your fingers clicking or anything. It's not, he doesn't make youthful music. He doesn't make music aimed at young people, kids or adolescents, certainly not adolescents. He makes music aimed at kind of older people, I think, people with more life experience. You know, possibly people who are interested or have some kind of affinity for spirituality or some kind of thing. I don't want to sound pretentious, you know, but I do genuinely think that there are some artists that make music that it's possible to grow into. I think Sinatra is another one. I think if you listen to In the Wee Small Hours by Sinatra, you know, that's clearly not going to appeal to a 19-year-old kid who's looking for thrills, you know, but it will appeal to him maybe later in life when he's had certain emotional experiences and he's had certain musical encounters. And it's just like a jigsaw puzzle, these kind of, you know, pieces finally slot into place. And I feel quite blessed to have finally discovered Van, you know, in my kind of mid-40s, because, you know, hopefully I've got a few more years left and there's a lot more Van albums to collect. I just wish they were cheaper. But anyway, that's my thoughts, that's my response to Shannon's video, Growing into Music. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Take care. Bye.